Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Raja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Raja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Asto Tarasata Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Asto Tarasata Sri Srimad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Jai.
Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vas Adigaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Tosi Maharani Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Hare Krishna. So we continue our study of Srimad Bhagavatam. We're in the second canto, the first chapter, entitled The First Step in God Realization. And today we are on text number 29, which goes as follows. Indra Dayo Bhava Ahur Ushra Karnal Disha Shrotram Amusya Shabdaha Na Sapya Dasrao Paramasya Nase Grahnosya Gandho Mukham Agnir Iddaha Indradayo Bhava Ayor Ushra Karnal Disha Shrotram Amusya Shabdaha Na Satya Dasrao Paramasya Nase Grahno Sya Gandho Mukam Agnir Iddaha Indradayo Bahava Ahur Usraha Karnal Disha Shrotram Amushya Shabdaha Na Satya Dasrao Paramasya Nase Grahno Sya Gandho Mukham Agnir Iddaha. Please chant.
Hare Krishna. Indradayo bhavaho ushraha karnao dishaha srotram amushya sabdaha nashasya dasro pamasya nase grahano asya bando mukam agni itaha. Hare Krishna.
इन्द्रादयो भाव अहुरुष्रः कर्णौ दिशस्थो श्रोत्रम् अमुष्य शब्दः नासत्यदाश्रौ परमस्य नासे ग्राणोस्य गन्धो मुखम् अग्निरिद्धः. हरे कृष्ण.
हरे कृष्णा. इंद्रादयो बाहव आहुरुस्त्रः कर्णादिशः श्रोतम् अमुष्य शब्दः नासत्यदास्त्रो परमस्य नासे ग्राणोस्य गन्धो मुखमग्निरिद्धः.
हरे कृष्ण. इंद्रादयो बहवे आहुरुषः कर्णौ दिशः श्रोत्रम् अमुष्या शब्दः नाशत्यो दश्रो परमस्य नाशे ग्रहणोष्य गन्धमुखमग्निरिद्धः.
Anyone else? Okay. Indra Adayaha, demigods headed by the heavenly king Indra. Bahavaha, arms. Ahuhu, are called. Usraha, the demigods. Karnau, the ears. Dishaha, the four directions. Shrotram, the sense of hearing. Amushya, of the Lord. Shabdaha, sound. Na Satya Dasrao, the demigods known as the Ashvini Kumaras. Paramasya, of the Supreme. Naase, nostrils. Granaha, the sense of smell. Asya, of him. Gandhaha, fragrance. Mukam, the mouth. Agnihi, fire. Idhaha, blazing. Translation. His arms are the demigods headed by Indra. The 10 directional sides are his ears, and physical sound is his sense of hearing. His nostrils are the 2 Ashvini Kumaras, and material fragrance is his sense of smell. His mouth is the blazing fire. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The description of the gigantic form of the personality of Godhead made in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is further explained here in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The description in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 11, verse 30, runs as follows. O Vishnu, I see you devouring all people in your blazing mouth and covering all the universe by your immeasurable rays. Scorching the worlds, you are manifest. End quote. In that way, Srimad Bhagavatam is the postgraduate study for the student of the Bhagavad Gita. Both of them are the science of Krishna, the absolute truth, and so they are interdependent. The concept of the Virat Purusha, or the gigantic form of the Supreme Lord, is said to include all the dominating demigods as well as the dominated living beings. Even the minutest part of a living being is controlled by the empowered agency of the Lord. Since the demigods are included in the gigantic form of the Lord, worship of the Lord, whether in his gigantic material conception or in his eternal transcendental form as Lord Sri Krishna, also appeases the demigods and all the other parts and parcels, as much as watering the root of a tree distributes energy to all of the tree's other parts. Consequently, for a materialist also, worship of the universal gigantic form of the Lord leads one to the right path. One need not risk being misled by approaching many demigods for fulfillment of different desires. The real entity is the Lord himself, and all others are imaginary, for everything is included in him only. I'll read the translation again. His arms are the demigods headed by Indra. The 10 directional sides are his ears, and physical sound is his sense of hearing. His nostrils are the 2 Ashvini Kumaras, and material fragrance is his sense of smell. His mouth is the blazing fire. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravan Pacharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshutarne Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Vanchakalpatrubhyashta Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Chapatikanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. Thank you all for joining again. So we are in the midst of a description of the universal form. As mentioned in this purport, the universal form is also discussed in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 11th chapter. And Srila Prabhupada mentions that since Srimad Bhagavatam is the postgraduate study of a student of Bhagavad Gita, that means whatever you learn in Bhagavad Gita, then you will learn even further. You'll learn how to master it. You'll learn deeper meanings of it. So everything that happens in Bhagavad Gita, all the instructions that are there, we get a deeper understanding of them so that we can not only know about them, but we can also apply them in our life. And that's the most important thing about the instructions of Gita. It's not that we could repeat them, it's that we can actually apply them to our life and then meet the ultimate goal of re-entering our eternal relationship with the Supreme Lord. So, descriptions of the universal form. I admit myself, when I was a very young aspiring Vaishnava, now I'm just a moderately, I'm in an old body, but I'm still very young in my aspiring Vaishnavism. But when I was very young and quite more immature than I am now, these descriptions of the universal form didn't really appeal to me very much. They don't have much juice in them, you know. I liked reading about Krishna playing with the cowherd boys and killing the demons and things like that. But the universal form didn't really appeal to me very much. And I used different quotes from the Shastras to actually justify my feelings. You know, I'd say, well, Arjuna, when he saw the universal form, it terrified him. He didn't want to see it, and it actually spoiled the mood. It spoiled the mood between him and Krishna. And so that he asked again, please show me your two-handed form. And Mother Yashoda, when little baby Krishna showed her the entire cosmic manifestation inside of his mouth, she also became bewildered because this is her son, this is her child. And could it possibly be that he's the source of everything? He's the Supreme Lord. I mean, to her, he's everything, of course. She's completely in love with him. She'll do anything for him. Her entire world revolves around him. But it's in this mood of, this is my son. But when she saw that her son actually was the center of the universe, not just in a theoretical sense, like, everyone's child is the center of the mother's universe. But Krishna actually is the center of the universe. He's the source of everything. So that sort of spoiled the mood. How could I, I can't believe I tied God up to a wooden grinding mortar. How many offenses have I committed throughout my life, right? So it spoils the mood. And so when Krishna again regained his form after showing Mother Yashoda the cosmic manifestation in his mouth, she said, please don't do that again. Meaning, she said it about the eating the dirt, because he was accused of eating dirt. And so she said, open your mouth, let me see. And eating earth, right? And so he opened his mouth and she saw the entire earth and all of the heavenly planets and everything else and time. And so when she said, don't do that again, it had two meanings. One was don't put dirt in your mouth. And also, please don't spoil this mood that we have. So I used these examples of these, wonderful devotees, not desiring to see the universal form, as an excuse for me to not really pay much attention when they come up in our Shastra. But they come up quite often. Here we are in the second canto. The second canto is entitled The Cosmic Manifestation, so there's something important about it. And this chapter is called The First Step in God Realization, so there's something really important about that too. As it turns out, for Arjuna and Mother Yashoda, who are pure devotees of the Lord, seeing Krishna's universal form is actually a downgrade for them, because they're already completely attached and enamored with a more intimate form of Krishna. So for them, it's a downgrade. But for us, we jivas who are in the material world, who made the unfortunate decision to try to live separately or independently from Krishna, to try to enjoy and control separately. For us, it's actually an upgrade, because right now we're seeing the world as something that serves us. Everything we see in this world, we see as, well, how does that have anything to do with me? How does that thing relate to me? Does it give me comfort? Does it give me protection? Does it give me sustenance? This is how we view the material world. Does it give me entertainment? Does it give me happiness? What kind of value does it have on me? And this is how we see the material world. For the most part, there are certain things that we at least understand theoretically God's presence in. But for the most part, the way we're dealing with this material world is that it is here to serve us, for our pleasure, to serve our senses, to serve our comfort, our entertainment, our protection, etc. And so for us who are in this material world and seeing the world in this way, not actually seeing Krishna's presence, the universal form of the Lord, as it says here, is the first step in God realization. So first step is to understand that everything we're already dealing with right now on a daily basis is actually Krishna's potency, Krishna's energy. The reason why we're attracted to these things is because Krishna's potency is within them. Now, the issue is we are attracted to them. That's not the problem. The problem is that we're only utilizing them for our own pleasure, and we're not seeing them actually as they are meant to be used, right? So we're using them in a perverted way, not a proper way. We're using them in an improper way. And so in order to use everything in a proper way, we have to see everything as it truly is, not as something to serve us, but as part of Krishna and as something to also use in his service. So just to address, I'm going over the general concept of the universal form, but I also want to address some of what's actually in today's verse. So his arms are the demigods, headed by Indra, means that the demigods, they are meant to protect and to give facility, proper facility to all of the praja, all of the living entities. And so since they are in charge of protecting and giving the different facilities that we need, handing us over proper weather and things like that, then that is the Lord's arms, because they're handing us stuff and they're giving us protection. But ultimately, it's the Lord that's giving them the service to do that, right? So we see, okay, yes, the demigods are providing so many things, the rains and the moonshine, it's helping grow the crops, and that gives us our sustenance and things like that. But they're getting their potency from the Supreme Lord. So if we just see the devatas, the demigods, as our protectors, and we don't see that they're just agents of the Supreme Lord, then we're missing out. We're missing the point. Then the 10 directional sides are his ears. It means he hears everything, every single thing. He doesn't have it's called a blind spot, but he doesn't have a deaf spot. There's nothing that he doesn't hear or doesn't know. And physical sound is his sense of hearing. So anything that makes a sound, he hears. Then his nostrils are the 2 Ashvini Kumaras. So it's worth noting here that the 2 Ashvini Kumaras, they are the presiding deities over the sense of smell. So when creation comes, and we'll read about that in the 5th canto. Oh, I forgot to mention that the universal form, it comes up more than just now. It's going to come up in the 3rd canto, again I'm not sure if it comes in the 4th offhand. It might. In the 5th canto, half of the canto is about the universal form, and it comes up again and again. So it's an important thing for us to understand, especially for we living entities who are here in the material world, not seeing Krishna in all of the things that we do. So in Srimad Bhagavatam 3.6.14, this is the translation. When the Lord's 2 nostrils separately manifested themselves, the dual Ashvini Kumaras entered them in their proper positions. And because of this, the living entities can smell the aromas of everything, right? So the facilities that we have, the nose and the sense of smell and the presiding deities of that, the Ashvini Kumaras, that all goes back to Krishna, because these Ashvini Kumaras are the nostrils of the Lord, right? Then, okay, his nostrils are the 2. And material fragrance is his sense of smell. So anything that has a fragrance, he smells it. So anything that makes a sound, he hears, etc. And his mouth is the blazing fire. So one thing I want to bring up about this is, in different cultures, we're brought up in different ways. So for example, if one is brought up in India and they have this culture, they actually know that the sense of smell comes from the Ashvini Kumaras. And they'll also know that the Ashvini Kumaras are just servants of the Supreme Lord. Some of them. Others may not know, depending on how they're brought up. Some may think, oh no, the Devatas, they're supreme. So for example, if a child is born without a sense of smell, I also actually don't have a sense of smell. But in my culture, there's a very different thing. So if one grows up in India and knows that the Ashwini Kumaras are in charge of the sense of smell, and the parents are concerned about, oh, my child doesn't have a sense of smell, but maybe he should, because sometimes it's an important thing. You can smell gas or smoke or some other dangerous things, and I guess it comes in handy. I myself have gotten myself into trouble a couple of times because I didn't have a sense of smell, but Krishna is in control, so I survived. But so if one grows up in this culture that they know the Ashwini Kumaras, and if they are concerned about their child, then they'll either get some pictures or some maybe small deities of the Ashwini Kumaras, and then they'll pray to them, please, please help my child out and make him whole. There's an example of this actually in Navadvip area. There's actually near Mayapur, there's a place called Rajpur, and we have a temple there, Jagannath Temple. That area is predominantly Muslim, the neighborhood. And so there are lots of Muslims that live around there. But it's not uncommon for them to visit the temple of Jagannath because they know he's also the Lord, right? So they'll come and they'll see that it's their village and there's the temple, and so they'll go. So one of these villagers, these Muslim villagers, had a child, and she was blind. She was born blind, and this Muslim villager, she had seen Lord Jagannath before. He has very big, bright, wide eyes. And so she thought, okay, well, if this is the Supreme Lord and he has these big, bright, wide eyes and he can see everything, maybe I should go and pray to him to help my child out who can't see. And so she did. She went to Lord Jagannath and she was praying like that. And I may be telling the details of the story wrong, but the principle's definitely on. Somehow, I don't remember if it was a pujari that suggested it to her or if she just got some divine inspiration, but she was either instructed to internally or from a pujari to give a gift to Lord Jagannath. Lord Jagannath needed a new mirror. One of the things that we offer the deities is a mirror, so they can see themselves and appreciate the decorations that the devotees have done like that, and so a mirror. So she, like I said, whether it was an internal inspiration or whether the pujari suggested it, I'm not sure. I don't remember. But somehow she brought a mirror to Lord Jagannath and offered this mirror while praying that her child get the sense of vision, and she did. This child then was able to see after this. So in different cultures, this is what we do. Now, I grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and so we didn't have that culture. My brother also doesn't have a sense of smell, and neither of us cared about it, because usually when someone says something about a smell, it's usually a bad smell. So we weren't really missing out on anything we didn't feel. So we didn't care. But if our parents were concerned and thought that we should have a sense of smell, they would have taken us to a doctor, an ENT, right? An ear, nose, and throat doctor. And they would have said, something's wrong with my sons. They can't smell. Can you do something about it? And they probably wouldn't have been able to do anything about it. As far as I know, nothing can be done. It's called anosmia. If anyone's curious, if you can't see, you're blind. If you can't hear, you're deaf. And if you can't smell, you have anosmia. You are an anosmiac. So different cultures means that we turn to different things to solve our problems. Now, the first step in God realization, as this chapter is called, is to understand that no matter who is helping us, they're actually just a small representation of the Supreme Lord, whether they are the Ashvini Kumaras or the ear, nose, and throat doctor. All of them are getting their potency from the Supreme Lord. As Srila Prabhupada mentioned in the purport, whether you are the dominating demigods or the dominated living beings, you are included in the gigantic form of the Virat Purusha, right? So there are those, even in Western culture, who understand that God is the ultimate cause of everything, right? So even though you're going to a doctor, you understand that everything's in God's hands. So if God wills it, then everything will be fine. And if he doesn't, everything won't. So everything's according to the Supreme Lord. But you still go to someone who has proper training and proper potency, which was also given to them by the Supreme Lord. Now, one thing I want to point out is that, so our spiritual journey, it's the spiritual world is infinite, it's vast. So there's actually no end really to our spiritual journey, because it's always going to increase. But we can see a beginning and an end of our path. The beginning of our current path was when we chose, when we misused our free will to try to become independent from Krishna, and we came to this material world. That was the beginning of a path. And the end of that path is when we finally completely realize that everything, our proper relationship, our proper sambandha, when we have the knowledge of our relationship with Krishna and act accordingly, and see everything as it, Bhagavad Gita, I think it's 6:30, for one who sees me everywhere and who sees everything in me, to him I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. So when we have this consciousness, when we see Krishna in everything and everything inside of Krishna, then that's the end of this particular material journey. Then we continue it's part of our spiritual journey, but it's the end of our material part. So in that sense, we can see a beginning and an end, and then we can sort of gauge where we are. If you draw a point and then another point, you have this line, and then there are different gradations. If we're closer to the beginning, then we're on elementary level. If we're closer to the middle, we're secondary. If we're closer to the end, we're tertiary. And if we're very close to the goal, then so we can see good, better, and best, right? In a sense. Now, what I want to point out, the reason I'm bringing this up, because this is talking about how some people, if they just worship the devatas and they're not understanding that everything is coming from the Supreme Lord. So different cultures actually have different advantages, right? So if you don't take into consideration that Krishna is in control of everything, whether he be the Ashwini Kumaras or the ear, nose, and throat doctor, if you don't take that into consideration, you will say that one who at least understands to go to the devatas for help, they're slightly closer to the goal. Just in this sense. There's another sense that we'll discuss. Than one who's going to a doctor, for example. So culturally, you're closer to your goal if at least you know about the devatas, because Krishna put the devatas in charge of these things. Again, he also gave the doctors their potency, so that's also there. But it's a higher principle to at least understand that the devatas are in charge of this, and they're given empowered by the Supreme Lord. Now I want to make this clear, because I don't want to make it sound like if you're worshiping the demigods, you're better than going to a doctor. Now, it is possible, like I said, if you're going to a doctor, but you do understand that God is ultimately in control, and if there is someone who culturally they accept the Ashwini Kumars and they're praying to them, but they do not understand that Krishna is in control, then the person who looks like they're on a lower level, since they're facing the Supreme Lord, in other words, you don't just take into consideration where you're situated on that line, you also take into consideration which way you're facing. So if the person who's technically situated lower on that line is facing Krishna, they understand that Krishna's there, then they are in a better position than the one who understands that the demigods are in control of the sense of smell, but they're not seeing the Supreme Lord. They're facing the other direction, right? It's a more favorable circumstance to be in the lower position but facing the right way. But we also have to understand that as soon as the person who's worshiping the demigods, as soon as they are given as soon as they develop a little bit of sincerity and they are given the knowledge that Krishna is the Supreme, they're the ones that are giving the devatas, the Ashwini Kumaras, proprietorship over that sense of smell, then they are actually in the better position, because then also culturally they are closer, because the spiritual world also has a culture, right? So not only are they higher up, closer to the goal, but they're also aimed in the right direction. Now, the important thing behind what I'm saying is, no matter where we are culturally, the thing that we have to focus on is aim ourselves in the right direction. So we shouldn't go from being a person who, anytime something wrong happens, we go to a doctor and not seeing Krishna as the center, to going to a demigod and still not seeing Krishna as the center. That's not what we should do. What we should do is, whatever position we're in, we should understand that Krishna is the potency behind this. And that's what this universal form is all about. It's showing us that no matter what we're dealing with, no matter what we find comfort in, support in, shelter in, entertainment in, it's all coming from Krishna. So if we do that, if we just turn around from our consciousness from being self-centric to being God-centric, and we understand how everything is to be used in Krishna's service, as instructed by the Guru, as shown the example of by the sadhus, and as instructed through the Shastras, then we can see Krishna within everything and see everything within Krishna, and then we'll never be lost. This is the position that we're trying to get to. So this is the importance of the universal form. Consequently, when we are able to see Krishna, so say I have an attachment, right? I've given several examples before. I don't know if I want to repeat the same ones, but yeah, why not? I used to be a race car driver, and I found value in that. But I also did dovetail it in Christian story. I'm not going to tell the whole story because it's a pretty long story. But I was able to, through study of Shastra and through the instructions of Guru and the examples of the sadhus, I was able to understand how the things that I was attracted to about driving a race car were actually just things that I could appreciate about Krishna. And then so through the Shastra and through the instructions of the Guru and through the examples of the sadhus, I was able to then redirect my enthusiasm from, being a race car driver to actually serving Krishna, right? And so there's this verse in the first canto, 5th chapter, verse 34. It says, thus, when all a man's activities are dedicated to the service of the Lord, those very activities which caused his perpetual bondage become the destroyer of the tree of work. So the very things that are causing us bondage can be the things that actually help liberate us. They will destroy the tree of work. They will destroy this bondage, right? And it's because we're now seeing these things as not as things to serve our senses or to serve us independently or separately from Krishna, but we're seeing how these things are actually meant to be used in Krishna's service. And since we already have an appreciation for them in general, now we can use them properly, and then our appreciation actually grows. Because now this concept that we were attached to, we had a small taste of it because we knew how it made us feel. But then when we actually understand how to use it properly and we see how it serves Krishna, then it's connected in its proper way. And then it's actually so much more uplifting, and not in the material sense, in a spiritual sense, which is a much higher fulfillment, a much higher upliftment. So to conclude, because I don't want to go too long, I just want to say that when we come to these descriptions of these universal forms, and they come up often, we shouldn't think that, this is something that's it's the first step in God realization. We should be on like the 5th or the 6th, or I can skip this because it's going to spoil the mood. It's not going to spoil the mood. Our mood currently is I'm trying to enjoy the material world. We'd like to spoil that mood. That's not a good mood to have. We need to see how Krishna is present in everything. Now, that's not to say, and I always put this disclaimer in here because sometimes I'm misunderstood when I'm talking about the universal form. I'm not saying that we should exclusively worship the universal form and not think about Sri Hari Krishna, playing on the bank of the Yamuna with his friends and eating lunch and herding the cows and interacting with his mother and his father and his girlfriends and things like that. I'm not saying that we shouldn't think of Krishna. We should only think of the universal form. What I'm saying is, in the aspect of our life where we're not automatically just spontaneously thinking of Krishna, we're just thinking of how something's serving us or being part of our comfort or entertainment, we have to be able to understand how Krishna is in those things, and then how to engage those things properly in Krishna's service. And that's what these descriptions of the universal form are all about. So we should pay very close attention to them because they apply to us. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, as they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly, right? So Arjuna and Mother Yashoda, they get to see Krishna, Bhagavan Sri Krishna, Yashoda Nandanandana, right? That's who they interact with. We who made the unfortunate decision to try to enjoy separately from him, this is how Krishna reciprocates with us accordingly. He gives us his presence in this universal form, which is what we're trying to use to forget him. This material world is a place where we're trying to control and enjoy separately from Krishna, right? And so he's reciprocating with us. He's rewarding us accordingly by entering into that, so that at one point, when we finally become sincere enough to understand that we are not the center of the universe, that Krishna is, and we start acting accordingly, he's there to give us instructions. He's there to show us that, okay, I will make, Krishna is saying to us that he will make this transition for us from materialism to spirituality easy, because he's already within everything. We just have to see it properly. So I'll read one more line from the purport again, because it was super important. It was toward the end. It says, consequently, for a materialist also, worship of the universal gigantic form of the Lord leads one to the right path. I have a bit of information that might come as news or a surprise to us, but we are materialists. We're also spiritualists, so that's good. We have that going for us. But wherever we're not seeing Krishna in any aspect of our life, we are also very much materialists. And so for us to switch that tendency from materialism to spirituality, we have to see Krishna as present in all of these different things. And this is the way we are to do it. So we have to understand this universal form. We have to appreciate this universal form. And if we're able to do so, if we come to that platform of pure devotion, like Arjuna and Mother Yashoda, then it's not that then seeing the universal form will spoil our mood. It's that we will be seeing Krishna everywhere. Like when Prahlad was asked by his father if his Lord was in this pillar, and Prahlad looked at it. Yeah, he thought, yeah, of course, there he is. He's right there. How else is the ceiling going to be held up if the Supreme Lord's potency is there? See, so he understands that the Lord's there. He saw the Lord there. Hiranyakashipu saw a pillar. Prahlad saw the Supreme Lord. So when we understand this, then, it's not that we, we see, we will see the world differently. We will see Krishna's presence in everything. And so it doesn't spoil it, because the universal form is an aspect of Krishna, right? So there's Brahman, there's Paramatma, there's Bhagavan. It's the same thing, but there's different levels of realization. So it is a supreme person who is all pervading. That's the Paramatma aspect. And who is the energy that is within everything, the Brahman aspect. So we have to appreciate the universal form from the Bhagavan perspective. We have to understand that it is his personal capacity within everything that we are appreciating. So as long as we're approaching the universal form in that way, not worshiping it in the sense that, like a pantheist who worships the sun because now you can see, or worships the mountains because when the rain comes down, then the water comes down through the streams, and then it allows us to divert that water to our crops, etc. It's not that we worship these different things. It's we see how Krishna is present in each of these things. And again, even if it's an ENT doctor, ear, nose, and throat doctor, instead of the Ashwini Kumars, if we're understanding that the potency is coming from Krishna, we're in good shape. And eventually we will learn that, okay, instead of going to the ENT, if you are concerned about your these things, then also, you don't even have to do one or the other. You could do both, cover all your bases. Go to, these presiding deities over these senses, or just go directly to Krishna. This is always the way that we should do. Akama sarva kama va moksha kama udardi. Whether you're full of desires, or you have no desires whatsoever, or you're desiring liberation, by all means you should approach the Supreme Lord. That's the conclusion. And so this is how we are able to see Krishna in everything. So that the fact that he came as the universal form is quite a display of his unconditional love for us, that the things that we're trying to use to forget him with, he's actually personally present in, so that when we finally come to our transcendental senses, we can actually properly understand him. This is what the universal form is all about. So if any of you, like I used to be, are sort of either bored or are reluctant to read these sections or study them, it actually means they're more for us, because we don't see what the connection is. Because those who see the connection, they can actually appreciate it, and appreciate that that's actually, oh, our Krishna, who is very personal, has done this for us and for the rest of the people in the material world, so that they can more easily come to Krishna, right? And so I'll stop there and see if there are any questions or comments or additions or even appreciations for the universal form or anything like that. Yes, Mother Vindhyavali, your hand is up, please.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranams, all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
All right.
It's a beautiful thing you said, this universal form, about universal form. And usually, like you said, praying God, like blindly, that's not the thing. I used to, because I did recently also. And in India, we have that feeling, when something happens, body parts or something. We go to the temple and we put the body parts in the deities, that there will be a box. We put in there. In Tirupati, we do that in India. So recently I did for my granddaughter, because she fell 25 feet down and she is not able to walk now. She's on wheelchair bound, 23-year-old girl. First quarter of medicine. So she's sitting in the wheelchair, which I felt very touching. But I just blindly pray God, but I didn't know that this much is there in Virat Roop, and this much is there, Ashwini Kumaras, like his nostrils, and then we should see God is everywhere. So I did blindly, but today I came to know how this affects. And adding to that, her karma also. I don't know which one I should feel that. But what I'm saying is, and then this is what these are demigods and that they are doing. But sometimes they say, no, demigods won't do anything. But this is the realization that for everything, Krishna is behind that.
Yes.
So that is the main part. And it's a lot of times, people say, you don't pay demigods and pay Krishna only. So that is not the thing. We pray demigods also. Krishna is there with them. So he's behind everything. That is what I realized today, Prabhu.
Yeah. And he gave them their service.
Prabhu? Okay.
He gave them their service. But yeah, we just shouldn't see them as the be all end all. We have to understand that maybe we're approaching them, but we understand that they are the servants of Krishna, and then that's acceptable.
Yeah. And when you are saying that, when your mother Yasoda asked him to open his mouth for eating dirt, and that picture came in front of me, how cute he was and how innocent she was. But that meaning and how much he had, and he's a little boy, but he is Supreme Personality of Godhead. Mother Yasoda was shocked about that. So where am I standing here in this? So I'm really not that, but please, thank you very much for Prabhu. And then this Virat Rupa, sometimes like Arjuna was scared about that. Yes, no wonder now when he showed, like you are saying that his mouth is a blazing fire. So we cannot see all that in Krishna. We want to see Krishna just with two hands. That's what he asked for it.
Yeah.
That is really a scary thing, but he has all that. And when we understand that, it will help. But this is a very good part.
For us, it's beneficial to know that, because we waste a lot of time.
Yes.
And if we understood how big of a deal that was, we wouldn't do it. If we understood how time worked and how it was devouring everything, we wouldn't waste our time. We would very enthusiastically, eagerly, and with as much sincerity and dedication as possible, we would be grabbing onto the feet of Krishna and our guru and the other sadhus and trying to figure out how to get out of this mess. But we don't do that because we don't see that. We don't actually consider that, oh yeah, time is running out, we're going to be demolished. We know it in theory. We know everybody dies. Death rate is 100%, right?
Yeah.
But somehow we live as if we're gonna live forever. I got time for that later. We put things off, we procrastinate, and that it's because we don't see Krishna in these things. So it is important for us to understand. It wasn't a great thing for Arjuna to see, because he didn't want to think of his friend that way. But we currently don't see Krishna as our friend. We unfortunately see him as a competitor, and we're competing with him. We're trying to take the attention that is his. And so understanding that he is time, which is all devouring, well, taking away everything that we think is real, everything material, then that should inspire us to not waste it, not waste time. And then for us, like I said, for us, it's an advantage. It's a step up to see, because then we're not wasting our lives.
Yeah.
For Arjuna, it was a downgrade because he already had spontaneous attraction to Krishna as a person. So right now we're spontaneously attached to the material world and how it makes us feel and how it gives us. So we tend to think, for example, that things come from stores. We in Western culture, like, so, when you need food, well, for cooking anyway, you go to the grocery store. If you want it to be already cooked, you go to a restaurant. If you need furniture, you go to the furniture store. You need appliances, you go to the appliance store, etc. But then there are these superstores, right? They have everything. They got the bank, the eye doctor, the restaurant, the groceries, the clothes, the appliances, the garden center. They got everything, right? All in one store, and they call it a superstore. And they're copying off of Paramatma, because there's the soul and then there's the super soul, right? So they're saying it's the supreme store. It has everything, and they actually want you to think that way. And we do think that way. Anytime we need something, we go, oh, I better go to this superstore to get my necessities, not understanding that everything comes from Krishna. Right? And so they're trying to take Krishna's supremacy, and they're succeeding, because that's what we do. When we think, oh, I'm hungry, we go to one of these stores. We don't think that, we don't actually see that Krishna's providing all of these things. And that's unfortunate. So that's what the universal form is all about. Even these superstores, they got their potency from Krishna. All of the ingredients that they have, they got them from Krishna. All the services that they provide, all of those services are coming from the potency of Krishna. So we tend these days to have this idea that modern science is supreme, right? But all modern, Srila Prabhupada called it so-called science or nescience, because all they're doing in the name of science is observing how the material world works, right? How Krishna set up the material world. And then they observe it under different circumstances. So they say, okay, if I do this, this happens. Okay, does it do it every time? Yeah, it does it every time. Okay, so then that's a law, right? Well, what if the temperature is different, or what if the pressure is different, or what if it's at a different altitude, right? Well, they do the same thing, and then they do these experiments, and then they find, okay, these things do affect it, but they affect it in a very predictable way. And then we come up with these things that we call laws. So, we discovered the laws of nature. No, Krishna made the laws of nature. You're just observing them. And then so we manipulate them in a certain way to make certain things to give us different advantages for our comfort and our entertainment, etc. But we don't actually see the full picture, right? There are other factors that we're not observing, right? And so in order to observe these other factors, we have to go to Shabda Prama. We have to hear from an authorized source, and that's Shastra. And then we can understand, because the importance to anything is that we're facing the right direction, right? And that's Krishna. So everything comes from Krishna. So this universal form It's so much more important than we could possibly imagine. And it pertains to us. This is how Krishna is reciprocating with us. As we surrender unto him, he rewards us accordingly. So currently our reward is we have this universal form where the things that we are using to try to forget Krishna can actually remind us of Krishna if we just use them in the right way. And that's what the universal form is showing us. So we're quite fortunate to have it. It's unfortunate if we skip over it when we get to it. And I know I used to. I used to skip over it. And I was actually, it took me being forced. I actually was forced. It became my service. I was writing curriculum for Srimad Bhagavatam for 2 different schools. And on each of those schools, the first thing I had to do was write the curriculum for the second half of the 5th canto, because no one wanted to do it. No one wanted to do it. It's a little bit difficult to understand. It's very technical. One of the purports isn't even translated. Srila Prabhupada just gave, it's not translated into English. It has all these different technical points of measurements and distances, and so people are bewildered by it. But if you study that second half of the 5th canto, it's all about how Krishna is present in all of these things and how we should see his personal presence, not just the aspect of Brahman, but actually his personal presence in all of these things. And we use that to go from being attached to the material world to being attached to Krishna just by diverting our attention, redirecting our attention in the proper way. That's what that section's about. It's not about the distance. Like, the distances are there, and the structure, that's all there. But the most important part is how it's all coming from Krishna. That lotus stem came up, and then Brahma was born from it, and then Brahma tried to figure it out himself. He was like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. And he couldn't figure anything out. He climbed down the lotus stem, and everything is actually in the lotus stem, but he didn't know what to do with it. So he went for a swim, couldn't get any inspiration, and then he started meditating. And as soon as he surrendered to the Supreme Lord, then everything was revealed. Hey, you're meant to do this creation, you're meant to expand this universe, and it's all here in this stem of this lotus flower. All you have to do is unfold it properly. And then he understood, and then he was able to do it. He still had the exact same ingredients, everything was there, but now he had Krishna consciousness. He understood. Now I know how to do it. And then so he was able to expand it. And then as he's expanding it, the sun is this distance away, and it moves in this particular way, and etc. That's all there. But it's all about how Krishna is there. And if we're trying to figure it out on our own capacity, or if we're trying to enjoy it separately, we're not going to understand it, right? Our Brahma, we are in the smallest universe and smallest cosmic manifestation in the whole material world. He has 4 heads, so he can process what he is to do. We have one very small, tiny head. We don't have the what is it called? The computational capacity. What is it called? Anyway, there's some word for it, but we don't process. Yeah, we don't have the processing speed or capacity to actually understand all of that. But if we study Shastra and act accordingly to its instructions, then we can live a proper life and then understand everything we need to know to get back to Krishna, right? So everything is already here, just like with Lord Brahma. Everything was already there. We just have to surrender unto Krishna, meditate upon him, and then take his instructions. Then everything will be a success. Otherwise, we're just going to be bewildered, confused, lost, facing the wrong direction, whether we're going to the Ashwini Kumars for a sense of smell, or we're going to the ENT doctor, or if we don't even care at all, we're just dealing with it. If we're not seeing Krishna in it, we're wasting our time. If we are seeing Krishna in it, no matter who we're going to, then we're not wasting our time. That's the point.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. I say, like you said, this end of this purport, they said the real entity is the Lord himself, and all others are imaginary, for everything is included in him only. That's all. That's really, we have to believe like that. Like you said, this is a postgraduate thing, Prabhu. And it needs a lot of, this second canto, I feel that it has a lot of things not like simply reading Bhagavad Gita. No, from that he is getting in this also. It's very interesting. Thank you very much for explaining all that.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything else?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat.
Hare Krishna.
So nice discussion is going on too. So I just need to know, is there any other word for Ashwini Kumar Dai?
Any other word for Ashwini Kumar? Means,
Yes.
do they have other names?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. They're twins. I think that they are. I think maybe they have a horse heads or horse bodies. Somehow there's a horse involved. I think, from what I remember. But they're twins, and they're the presiding deities over the sense of smell, and they come from the nostrils of the Lord. I don't know if they have another name. I'm
They're
sorry.
demigods?
Yes, the presiding deities, the demigods of the
Okay.
sense of smell.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Kalpesh Prabhu, you have your hand up.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, please accept my humble obeisance. All
Go ahead,
glory
please get mine. Jai Prabhupada.
for your class, Prabhuji. So, Prabhuji, lately realizing related to that, one of the in the Bhagavad Gita, it says Karpanya Doshat Swabhava Mudva Chetaha. So, in that, where we kind of seeing like as we when in the neophyte stage of the bhakti life, and when we start doing things and listening the discourse and trying to chant it, I'm realizing that okay, somehow to do this, because of my own nature and conditioning, and is very popularly outward when people are seeing you as you are doing a Krishna. Yes, they often judge you, and also this is also a feeling which comes within ourselves also, that to run away from our duties, and and become more irresponsible, and really that is due to the false ego believe that we can secure and satisfy without the connection with Krishna. Like we are seeing separate from Krishna. That's what happens, and that irresponsible leads to, because our bhakti and bhajan is not like strong, so of having that also strong, and also running from the duties, right, which is what the Arjuna's case was, right, like
Yes.
he was confused, and 99 because people when we try to preach others, right, and then their biggest fear is if somebody follows the bhakti, then he will go and run away from from his basic life, and we can see that is to, even like after I know this, I still have that understanding, like okay, I try to restrain myself, but I feel like I should do this. That doubt always comes, but my bhajan is not pakka, right? I mean, my bhajan is not strong, that I
Yes.
24 every time, and when I'm not thinking about Krishna, and also I'm irresponsible in my duties, and when I choose myself in a grihastha, then we do then do, what can we tell about those kind of bhakti, because if we are not doing our duties, in our mind we are not thinking about Krishna, and we wanted to abandon our duties and run away from it, and at the same time we are not doing bhajan, we are thinking that we want to do, we go there, not really taking our responsibility sincerely, and and under the false ego, which makes us believe that we are secure and satisfied without connection, because that is what the false ego do, right?
Yes.
They will ask for independence, memorize its own ego, and individualism is more powerful in that, not the servant mentality. So
Yes.
understanding this, like how do you guide people who are in Grihastha, and what is the I always see that the behavior matters a lot, when we are dealing with, when we want to make real our spouse, bhakti, and then to perform our duties very sincerely with our heart and remembering Krishna. But I mean, you being a senior devotee and practicing Krishna consciousness very sincerely, I see it that way. So how do you help situation if I have to explain somebody, because 90 teaching, right, and they don't want to accept is because they are seeing this one of the symptoms, and and they don't want to do this, because they see that people will run away from this.
So the short, simple answer is that every problem that we have is because we're not seeing Krishna in it.
Correct.
Right. And so the solution is we have to learn how to see Krishna in everything. Right. And that means we need more Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. And also chanting, because the Guru instructs us to chant. So when we chant, then Cheto Darpana Marjanam, it cleans the mirror of our heart. We start dissolving the illusion, the very elaborate illusion that we've fabricated on this misuse of our free will, that we are actually separate from Krishna. That starts to dissolve, and we start to see, oh, actually, no, I'm not separate from Krishna. This is what the chanting of the holy name does. And then as that starts becoming clearer, the Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra will show us how to then act properly. Because right now we're acting improperly because we think the world is our oyster. We're here to enjoy, as we wish. So that's the simple answer. Whether we're applying that to ourselves or we're applying that to others, that's the simple answer. So for us, it's applied, more simply, more directly, because we have to deal with our mind, which is like dealing with another person, but it's a little bit more cut and dry. When we're dealing with others, and they have different fears or doubts or misgivings or whatever, we just have to find, if we are preachers, we have to find the spark that they have, whatever actual connection that they have, whatever appreciation they have of spirituality. You fan that. You don't have to address the things that they have doubts about right off the bat. You find the things that they actually appreciate. You fan that. Once that appreciation grows, then their illusion, which is causing that doubt, will then disappear, right? They'll understand, oh, okay, so then there's no fear of, not running away from your duty or this or that or the other thing, if we're actually performing our service properly. So if we just keep that in mind, that simple and short answer of all of our problems are caused because we don't see its connection to Krishna, and in order to see the connection to Krishna, we have to consult Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, and regularly chant and ask Krishna to clear up our illusion, right? And so for us, that's how it goes. And then for preaching, it's the same way. But we have to find, again, where people are making that connection. It's a little spark. That's what Krishna does too. He sees whatever little sincerity we have, that little spark, and he fans it until it becomes a tiny flame, and then a bigger flame. And then all of a sudden it's devouring all of our illusion, all of the improper samskars that we have, that we've built up over time, that food comes from the store, and all my necessities are coming from these tech moguls and inventors, and all that just gets completely burned up, and there's no more doubt that if you live this way, it'll be irresponsible. That illusion's gone, right? We just understand that no, actually you're irresponsible if you're wasting time, if you're not utilizing this human form of life. That's what it becomes. And then you start thinking, oh, I better stop wasting time instead of no, I have to perform this duty because this is the most important thing. You could do both. You maintain your family while engaging in spirituality, and that's the process. You don't pick one or the other. Well, you do pick one or the other. It's spirituality, but it doesn't mean you abandon your family. It means that your family is now, you see everything in connection to Krishna with them, right? And then so that just continues on, but with a different consciousness, with a different mentality. So it takes time to understand how to apply that simple instruction that I gave. But the process is the same. Whenever there's a problem, know that it's because you're not seeing the connection with Krishna. And if you do want to see that connection with Krishna, chant, consult with Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. Done. If we follow that formula, and our little spark of sincerity is fanned by our desire and our perseverance to try to solve the problems by Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, and not fall back on our old materialistic ways of no, I'm going to depend on this self-proclaimed self-help guru, or this tech giant, or this whatever. No. When we have the problem, we go Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, and we chant. Krishna sees that sincerity. He fans that spark for us. The illusion that somehow this material world is ours to enjoy separately and has value on its own disappears. We understand that all of the value here is in Krishna alone, and then we start acting accordingly. So that's the process, and sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it's shorter. It depends on how much sincerity is there. It depends on how determined and perseverant we are in trying to solve these problems through the proper channels instead of through the channels that we've come to think were proper because of our conditioning. But as we surrender unto Krishna, he awards us accordingly. So we approach him more, we'll get more and more realization. But as soon as we think, here's the kicker, the important thing to understand, when we surrender to Krishna, and then he rewards us with this, he removes that illusion and we start acting properly. If at some point we think that we are the doer of that spiritual advancement, like, oh, look, just see how far I've come. I've done this. I did spirituality good. If we think we're the doer, then we're again self-conscious. We're not Krishna conscious. So then we lose access to that progression. We don't lose it because there's no loss or diminution on the path, but we lose access to it temporarily until we again turn back to Krishna. We turn back to Krishna, then we pick up right where we left off. We don't have to start all over again. But this is important to understand. So as we're making progress, or I should say, as we're going through progress, because if I say making progress, it sounds like we're doing it. As we're progressing through the devotional path, as Krishna is pulling us, right? We can't think that I'm the doer. All you're doing is holding on. That's it. And facing the right direction. If you turn around, then you're not holding on anymore. Does that answer your question, Prabhu?
Yeah, Prabhu, I'm thinking about it.
Okay.
It on this what you just said, and maybe there is an answer here. But when we are in that dilemma, like it's very difficult. I got some of the hints from your answer, which is consistent with what Bhagavad Gita in that same shloka. It's you approaches tell me to certain what me. How I am your disciple and soul surrender unto you.
Yeah. Right.
And which is what you are. Guru Shastras, we look for an instruction at that point. But it was humble position of Arjuna understanding confused. Most of the time people don't know they are confused.
No, yeah, that's the problem.
Because they think no, they are doing right, and then irresponsible.
Yeah, and they're the only ones that are doing it right. Everyone else is being irresponsible. Isn't that funny? How every single person thinks they're the only one that's doing it right.
Yes, exactly.
Everybody's wrong.
That is what his position was, a humble position.
Yeah, that's what we need. We need to have that sincerity. Otherwise, it doesn't go away. There has to be a that's why it comes to free will. You have to willingly accept, at least in theory, that you are not the center, that Krishna is. And then you have to start acting accordingly as directed by Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. And as you do that, the more you do that and turn away from this idea that, no, my way is the right way. The more we do that, the more, like I said, that veil of illusion is removed. And the more we're actually enlightened to see, oh, this is actually how this is meant to be used, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the process. I already put my notes away, but there was the very beginning of the purport to 630, the one that says, "For one who sees me everywhere and who sees everything in me, to him I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me." The very first sentence, or maybe the first two sentences, so good. I recommend. I mean, always read Bhagavad Gita, but if you want extra inspiration on today's particular topic, yeah, read that first, or read the whole purport. But it shows how it said this is the basis of Krishna consciousness. We have to be able to see Krishna within everything. And so that's the process. Just, when I gave that simple short answer, that is always the answer. Now it'll come in different details because we have to know how to apply it in different circumstances. But that is always it's the only thing we need to know, right?
Yeah.
When Krishna says that, what's the I always mess up the English of this verse, but it's the, just as all purposes served by a small well can be served by a big reservoir of water, all purposes of the Vedas are served by one who knows the purpose behind it. And the purpose of the Vedas is to understand Krishna. We know this from Bhagavad Gita 15:15. Vedas chasavaramahameva vedo. Vedanta Veda Vedeva chaham. So of all the Vedas, I am to be known. That means the point of the Vedas is to understand Krishna. So if you understand that and act accordingly, then every other aspect of the Vedas is known to you, because that's all the Vedas is doing. It's entering different circumstances and then showing the details of how to get to know Krishna through that particular thing. But if you already know that, then that simple answer that I just gave earlier, that's all you need to know. You just need to then figure out how to apply that. And figure out how to apply that means consult Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra and chant japa. Because if you think that you're going to figure it out on your own, you're not going to get there. If you realize that, no, this has to come from Krishna, so chanting Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, then everything will be revealed. This is the basis of Krishna consciousness. If this is the only thing we understand about Krishna consciousness, it's enough. That's it, right? And if we know so much more, if we can relay all the pastimes and quote all the shlokas, but we don't know that, then it's not enough. We don't know enough. That's the only thing we need to know. Everything else is gravy on top of that. It all helps, but that's the essential point. If we don't understand that, we're going to be lost. And not only understand it, we have to actually apply it. We can understand it in theory and still be lost if we're not applying it. But that's the importance. So it looks like, yeah, we've gone over. I'm sorry. I can't see the time when I'm in this Zoom mode. I have to kick out of it, but I see that we've gone over.
Thank you very much, Prabhu, for nice explanation. Here in this 631, as even Prabhupada's purport was saying that Brahma was saying, Premanjan Charita Bhakti Vilochanena.
Yeah.
So that was really good. Thank you very much, Prabhu. Nice explanation today you gave.
Thank you.
Very much, Prabhuji, for answering this. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Vanchakalpatarubhyascha
Anant Koti Vaishnava Vrind ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.